Hey guys. So we are doing a nail ramble at my altar. just for just because I want to, honestly. um and tonight with Samhain approaching, I figured it would be fun to talk a little bit about why I work with two deities that are technically deities of death. and just a little bit more on that. Um, I'm gonna grab some incense. I'm feeling vanilla tonight. Vanilla scent tends to be a scent that connects me with my beloved dead. When I was little, my grandfather would burn vanilla candles, and I don't know, it just makes me think of him. I also use it in association with Frigg, but yeah, so let's just get right into it while I kind of light everything up here. And we will start with, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about how how these two deities came into my life. I know I've talked about this a little bit more or previously on my channel, but for the sake of kind of recapping to me, it seems to make sense. Um, and it's kind of interesting because Freya is my matron deity, and technically she is associated with death as well because Freya gets half of her pick before Odin of those who die in battle. And they go to her hall, and those who do not go to Folkvagner go to Valhalla with Odin. So Freya is also associated with death, but in Norse mythology, there's many different ways, many different realms of death, I should say, or places for the souls to go once they pass. And Hel presides over Helheim. And as far as my understanding of the mythology, she tends to take in those who are sick or who have died of old age and so forth. And my understanding of Helheim is also that it is not a bad place. I've always had a, I've always understood that it is a very calm, quiet place, a very peaceful place. But in in my regard of my own practice and how I work with Hel, I don't generally work with her so much involving the dead. I more work with her involving shadow work. And how that came to be, we're coming up on a year now of Hel being in my practice. For some strange reason, I kind of always felt that she would end up there. I can't fully explain why, but you know, you guys are all pagan watching this. You know. you know. um but when I started to really understand that it was her, I sat in meditation and greeted her, which is something that I've started to do with the last few deities that have come into my practice. And they've all kind of come in their own different ways. And I know that I've talked about this as well on my channel, but um, I sat with Hel, and I won't go into complete detail of the meditation, but there was a moment sitting with her near a fire in the snow where she told me that, much like what occurred in the meditation before I reached this forest where she resided, this cold forest, I had to crawl through this rock formation that created almost a cave, and it was very uncomfortable and frightening, honestly. I'm terrified of bugs. I'm really scared of centipedes and spiders. They just creep me out. And those were in there, kind of, to me, in a very physical manifestation and symbolic of fears. Well, when I sat with her after coming through this cave like formation, she had told me that, much like the experience that I just had there, I would come out of this not being the same. A few weeks later, I had a reaction to a medication that was switched um, to combat my depression and anxiety that I've struggled with since I was 14. Well, we decided to change up my medication to try and also combat newly diagnosed fibromyalgia, which is a very complicated condition. And one of the things is that they use a medication called Cymbalta. So we switched my medication from what I was on, which was Zoloft and um, Buspar, to Cymbalta, and I experienced one of the worst experiences of my life. I went into psychosis, and I had deep suicidal ideation, and it brought back all these old wounds, but I felt like I had no control. It was beyond terrifying. Thankfully, I had the sense to get help after pretty much a week of this. At least I think, honestly, time kind of blurred. Um, and I came out of it not being the same. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I finally understood, once my head was clear and I was back on my normal medication, that that experience and her coming into my life just a few weeks prior, that's not a coincidence. And I started to understand that hell is here to help me, guide me through trauma and dealing with CPTSD and dealing with my own shadows and my own struggles that I have been on the path of healing for the last 5 years now, really intensely, going through therapy and taking all of the proper routes for that, for my mental health. But there's a spiritual side to it, and when you look at everything through a spiritual lens, as we do as pagans, having a deity come into your life and help you, guide you through that, is immensely powerful. And honestly, I don't think I have the proper words to really express how truly powerful that is. So I have now started to affectionately call her the Shadow Mother, and this is where hell has kind of presided in my practice. Um, Now, I will be honoring her on Samhain, of course, for what she does with the dead, in the Norse tradition. But in my own personal practice, she does not represent working with the dead as much as Santa Morte does. Well, um, Santa Morte came into my life not too terribly far off after my mother's passing. I had a lot of really random experiences with her that seemed to just be synchronicity or coincidence after coincidence, to the point where I didn't fully understand, until I read a book that just so happened to mention her, and then I understood what she was. Um, I knew very little of her, and my experiences with her started with going to Pagan Pride at here in Minneapolis in 2018, and this is the fall. My mother died in the spring, so this is the fall, after this. And they had a huge altar set up to her, knowing the Samhain was approaching and all that stuff. And I remember staring at it. I even took a photo of it. And I don't know, I just felt compelled to take a photo of it. So I didn't think much of it, but I kept feeling kind of drawn throughout the day to kind of eyeball back to the altar and circle back through all the vendors and all the things that were going on. And I didn't think much of it, and then about mid-November, my brother had gone to Mexico, and he went, I think, shortly before Dia de los Muertos, and he brought me back, just by strange coincidence, he brought me back this sugar skull. It's ceramic, and I kept it by my ancestral altar because it just seemed to make sense, of course. Not knowing that my brother also kept his that he had brought back, by our mother's ashes, because we all three of my siblings, or my brothers and I, we have, all three of us have some of our mother's ashes. So, it was kind of funny when I was like, "Oh, I keep this here," and he's like, "That's where I keep mine," and it just was interesting. And all the while, I'm trying to navigate the open gateway that is occurring preceding my mother's passing to my abilities with mediumship, and finally accepting this as who I am after having experiences here and there throughout my life and trying to push them away because I've been scared. And my mother's passing was a huge step in the direction of understanding this side of me. Well, I was on a reading kick in. Oh, I'm trying to reach for a book. I was on a reading kick in the beginning of 2019, and I came across this book, which is From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doughty. Um, it is a fantastic book. It is basically traveling the world to find a good death, and it talks about how um, how many other cultures look at death differently than we do, and how we're kind of removed here in the West, which is personally something that I have always felt. And in this, um, there is a whole chapter on Mexico, and there is a moment where she talks about Santa Muerte, which I'm trying to find, to be perfectly honest. But this chapter was really heavy for me. I felt very emotional reading it, and I was in tears. And I don't want to spoil this for anyone who has never read this book, but if you have and you've read the chapter on Mexico, you will know what I'm talking about. But anyway, the realization of understanding that Santa Muerte was a female entity somehow kicked it into gear of me realizing who had been contacting me. Because for some strange reason, I honestly thought that Santa Muerte was just Grim Reaper, the Grim Reaper, which she is, but like a male personification. Um, and learning that she was female, I don't know, something spoke to me about that. Understanding that it's it's another deity, or in her case, a folk saint, um, who presides over death and watches those and cares for those who pass. And I came to really want to know more about her. And I have learned now that that is where she wanted to be. She wanted to have a presence in my life and in my home, sitting on my ancestral altar to watch over those who have left me. Little did I know that the years to come would continue to have loss after loss. In a year's time now, I have lost 5 people that I have cared about. Um, and it's and since 2017 up until this last year, it has been one every year. So there's been a tremendous amount of loss in my family and in my life. And so much so that with my grandmother passing just a few weeks ago, that now leaves my mother's immediate family completely gone. My mother, my 2 uncles, my grandfather, and my grandmother are all gone. My mother's immediate family. It's wild. And to make sense of so much grief and to make sense of my own experiences with the afterlife and my own experiences with this side of me being having this connection, I do feel like working with um Santisima, I feel like she helps navigate this for me. So it's interesting having these two deities in my practice that represent death, that care for the dead, that are, um, you know, that have those same presences, but they're also very, very different. And in my practice specifically, they are quite different. But I'm grateful to both of them for the things that they have helped me navigate. Um, Now, this isn't necessarily about the two of them, but there is another thing that I do want to kind of tag onto this video that does involve mediumship, because this to me was very profound. And I really want to share it with you guys because it's insanely validating. And when you have these experiences, you're conditioned to be taught that this isn't real or that you're crazy or everything in between. And it's damaging, truthfully. In my experience, it's been damaging. I would have had so much of a deeper and better understanding of myself in a healthy way if someone had turned to me and told me that what I was experiencing was normal. And I didn't get that until I sought it for myself. And my trying to seek out understanding mediumship was what led me to becoming pagan. So I'm grateful to that, and I'm grateful to my resilience to that. But I have always, when my grandmother Lily got sick at the beginning of this month, she went very quickly, and in that time, I had been thinking about all the things that I wanted to say to her, and all the things that I've wanted to say to my grandmother Mary Lane, who is still with us. And thankfully, I got to see both of them while I was in Washington. I got to spend time with them. But my grandmother Lily, uh, she her Alzheimer's had progressed to the point that she didn't know who I was, and that was extremely painful. But I still got to see her. I still got to spend time with her, and I know that I was meant to. But in my experiences with being home and visiting my family, I went to go visit my other grandmother, my grandma Mary Lane, and at that time I had shared this in a previous video, but she had noticed the tarot card tattoo that I have here, which is extremely hard to share at this angle. Um, but she was asking about it, and I'd said that I read cards, and she's like, "Oh, so do I," and that sparked something in me. And it was phenomenal to hear that my grandmother read tarot cards, but it also was phenomenal to understand that I might have a deeper connection with him than I think, or with her than I think I realize. And I kept thinking about it ever since I left her house that day. So, with my grandma Lily becoming sick, I decided to have the courage to call my other grandma, my grandma Mary Lane, and I said, Grandma Lily's in the hospital. She's not doing well, and there's some things I need to say to her, but there's also some things I need to say to you. And she said, I can feel like I can tell you anything, so open up, talk to me. And I said, there are times where I will call you and you'll pick up the phone and say, I was just thinking about you. There are so many situations where I swear you have intuitive abilities, and I just want to know what your thoughts and feelings are about this, because I do, and this has been a big part of my life. And I said, do you have dreams about those who've passed? Do you experience them or sense them near you? Do you have these experiences that I do? And it took so much courage to open up to her and tell her this, but I knew that she wouldn't judge me. And she said, yes, actually, I have my whole life. And it was so strong when I was younger that I actually turned it off, turned away from it. And she said, I feel terrible that I did that because I could have helped you understand what was going on with you. And I was blown away. I was very emotional in the sense of understanding that my grandma had these experiences and I wasn't alone. And that is very validating when you have something like that. And there are many people who don't. And there are many people who aren't I don't necessarily think that I was born with this, and I think it just kind of started to happen when I was younger. Um, and I wasn't seeing full body apparitions or anything phenomenal. I was just seeing shadows at night that were figures, and it terrified the ever living shit out of me, to be perfectly honest. But I was afraid to sleep in my own room up until I was a preteen. I was so scared. And now I wish that I had known what I was seeing, um, because I think that that would have helped me, but it is what it is. Now, I will say that I am not on here basically claiming, or, you know, I'm not here to boast about the fact that I have a family member who has these same experiences, because I very strongly believe that things like mediumship are something that you can learn. I think that some of us are much like a musician, some of us are born with an innate talent, and others learn it through hard work and practice. So, if this is something that you are interested in, or that you feel this could be a fine or a muscle that you can fine tune, there are resources available to you to learn that. There's many people who do mediumship courses and one-on-one training, and there's many books that you can read on the subject. So I would encourage you to do that if you feel that way. But I did want to add that into my talk about the dead and working with deities who represent death, because to me that was groundbreaking, and it is a healing process for me as well, and one that I do think, in regards to the healing aspect of it that Held presides over, I do feel that she's guiding me through all of this baggage that I have been carrying around my whole life, and trying to unlearn those patterns and everything else that comes along with the mucky mess that is personal development. But again, I will say, never stop doing it, guys, because you're doing the best work you possibly can for you and anyone else that you can lead by example. If you inspire someone through the personal work and resilience that you are showing for all of the things that you are doing for yourself, then your pain has mattered. And that's the way that I look at it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little chat. I'm actually quite proud of myself because I've been quite articulate tonight. Go me. And I hope you enjoyed me talking a little bit about both Hell and Santa Muerte and my experiences with this stuff. I love coming to this platform to open up about these things because it is very difficult for me to open up in general with this kind of stuff, just because I am still trying to not train my brain to feel like the world is against me when it comes to this stuff. So, thank you guys for watching, and as always, blessed be.